is. So we are starting to record. So welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so welcome to Building Your Career in Out of School Time and Beyond. We're really excited that you are here today. I guess we can introduce ourselves first. My name is Melanie Kartzmer. I'm a program manager with the Denver After School Alliance. I use she, her pronouns. Really excited that you're all here today and excited to be doing this training. Heather?
Good morning, everyone. This is Heather Interest with Department of Extended Learning. And Melanie and I have done this workshop a couple of times, and we love it. It's something that's really great to be thinking about. It's just a self-improvement thing for all of us. And now that we have some of us a little bit more time than we're used to, it's a good time to really start thinking about these things and not just put them off until you desperately need them.
Great, so just a few requests for our virtual experience today. The first is that this is an interactive and human-centered workshop. Heather and I love participation and engagement and trainings that aren't just kind of a sit and get. And so if you have questions, if you have comments, ideas, we would love to hear from you. We'll give you some kind of methods to share your feedback and questions. You can use that chat box. You can do a raise hand function, we'll show you in a second. And just really excited to sort of share this content with you and excited for your participation. The next is to just put your cell phone away, close the windows on your screen. I know with these virtual trainings, it can be a little tricky to sort of stay focused for the length of the training, and I understand, but really giving yourself permission to be present will allow you to get the most out of this training. And the last is please have patience and grace with technology. I was facilitating a couple of weeks ago for a national conference, and at the end of it, towards the end, there was a Comcast outage in my area, and I kept getting booted off the call and then having to like come back in and be like, okay, where was I? So I have lived my technology horror story. I hope that that won't be the case today, but just ask, this is sometimes this is out of our control, and so just having some patience and grace with technology. I know many of you have been on Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom calls, maybe more than you'd like, but do want to kind of share just a couple of quick tools that we'll be using on Zoom so that you can make sure that you can fully participate. The first is that mute button. So you're all doing a wonderful job so far. You can mute yourself when you're not talking, and if you have something to share, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. The next is that video. Heather and I love to be able to see all of your faces when we're kind of engaging. And so if you're able to turn on your video, we would love that. If you have to step away, feel free to turn that video off and then back on when you return. The next is that chat box. So if you haven't already, if you want to go ahead and use that chat box to write your name and your organization, that would be super helpful in just us in tracking attendance today. Feel free to put your questions in there. When one of us is facilitating, the other one will be able to kind of manage that chat box. And so we'll be able to answer whatever questions you have. And the last one I'm going to share is that participants button. This can let you do a whole bunch of things. The first is there is a raise hand feature. There aren't a ton of us today, so we'll try to kind of have our screens up. So if you have any question, you can write in the chat box or use that virtual raise hand or physical raise of hand, and we'll get you whatever questions you have answered. I would also love for all of us to rename ourselves. Some of us are using different Zoom accounts and that sort of thing. So to do that, if you click that participants button at the bottom and hover over your name and click more and then rename. For some people, it's 3 dots and then rename. And just put in your name, organization, your pronouns. So I'm Melanie Kartzmer, Denver After School Alliance, and I use she, her pronouns. So I'm just going to give you a moment just to go ahead and do that. So again, just click that participants button, hover over your name, click more or the 3 dots, and then rename. And that way we can have that noted. And if you're having any questions or trouble with that, feel free to send me a message in the chat box and I can get you helped out with that. So again, just participants at the bottom, hover over your name, click rename. And that way we have a better sense of who's in the call with us. So our agenda for today, we're going to start off with a welcoming ritual. Then we're going to move into all things resume, cover letters, and then interviewing, and then end with an action plan, our optimistic closure, and a survey. So we have a loaded agenda for you today, and hopefully we'll be able to get through all of it. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Heather.
All right. My slide deck is giving me just a little bit of trouble. Hang on just a second. Okay, so what I'd like everybody to do right now is enter one word into the chat box describing how you feel about your resume and interviewing.
From the phone, do you just want us to like chime in?
Sure, if you are on the phone and not able to use the chat box, just say a word. So I'm seeing a couple of words in there: unsure, progress, outdated, developing, incomplete, wait for a couple more people to add in a word: work in progress. Always learning, unsure, long, could use updates, unsure. So if I was to notice any themes in those responses, I would say that nobody's feeling fabulous quite yet about both their resume and interviewing, which I would have been surprised if anybody said that. In all the times that we've held this workshop, we haven't had anybody say, I'm ready to go, everything's wonderful. And so working from that place together of we all are kind of a little unsure and wanting to just learn about what's current and how to really freshen up our resumes and our cover letters, as well as, you know, how can you really truly be prepared for an interview? And so that's what we're going to be diving into today. So the one thing that I want to just remind you is that your resume is highly personal. And lots of people will give you feedback. And hopefully, you know, that you've had people give you feedback about your resume before. If you haven't, you definitely need to make that a practice. But ultimately, if somebody tells you, hey, you should remove this, or hey, you should change this, it is something that is uniquely you. And so if your gut is telling you, actually, like, I love that part, stick with it, because you are reflected on a piece of paper. And that's why your resume is so important, that it actually reflects you. I tell a story often about a colleague of mine who's one of the most warm and caring people that I know in life. And their resume was so cold and it just didn't reflect them. And so as we're thinking about this and as we're proceeding, I really want you to consider, you know, does my resume reflect who I really am? So I wanted to bring up these two examples of current resumes. These would be considered stylized resumes. You'll notice that they have color, they have pictures, they have a lot of formatting, and people feel very strongly about stylized.
Sorry, we can't see your screen. So do you want me to share the screen for you?
Sorry guys, let me try one more time. Yeah, Mel, it says it's sharing. So if you can't see, if you could go ahead and share, that'd be great.
Great, yep, will do.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, so these are the two resumes that I was discussing that have lots of color and formatting and pictures. The one on the left is the CEO of Yahoo, and her name is Marissa Meyer. And if you Google, best resume ever or most fabulous stylized resume, Marissa Meyer's resume often pops up. And I will tell you that people feel strongly about it. Some folks really feel strongly like, man, I love looking at this. I'm a visual learner, visual reader. I think it's super interesting. And then other people are like, you're not the CEO of Yahoo. Don't use this template. So I think that's one of those things where you need to make decisions for yourself. We will, of course, send out this deck after this session. And we provided some resume template websites that have some nice resume templates. If you're like, I really need to just update the formatting, we have provided some examples for you here. I think one of the most interesting things, I would definitely categorize myself as a visual learner, is that I do respond to a little bit of color on resumes. I do respond, like on Marissa Meyer's resume at the bottom about how she says a day of my life. I think it's really fascinating. And so would recommend, like, go check out her resume, or you can just look at it in this presentation, because I think there are things in it that might resonate with you. You can go ahead to the next slide, Mel. So a couple of things to think about with your resume. A lot of times, and some of you even said this in your chat box, that you feel like your resume is too long, and almost everyone's is. But I will say that the whole you have to keep your resume to one page, that has kind of gone by the wayside. I haven't come in contact with a hiring manager in the past 7 years who's like, man, I wish they would have fit all this on one page. So I want you to consider that more than one page is fine. One thing that all of us in OST are really guilty of is using a lot of vernacular or acronyms. And so you have to be really careful on a resume to not just say OST and assume that somebody knows what that is, or YPQA. You need to spell it out. And so really avoid any kind of acronyms, even DPS. Like, don't take for granted that people know, Boys and Girls Club Metro Denver, like the abbreviation for that. You need to spell out all of the acronyms. Also, if you can say something simply, say it. Don't use all the words. And so I think that's something that as we review resumes, that I've seen just a lot of trends, that people use a lot of fancy flowery language to say what could be said simply. And so I'd really encourage you to don't use all the words. One of the biggest things when people are looking at a lot of resumes is that numbers visually stick out. And so if you can use numbers in your resume, increased participation by 64%, improved retention by 15%. If you can use numbers in your resume, they're like a magnet for people's eyes. And so I'd really recommend that you use numbers, because numbers are also representative of data. It's fact. People like fact. If you just say, I did great things, that's not fact. But numbers often represent fact, and they're one of the things that humans most look for when they're looking at something with a lot of text. One thing that this example doesn't have is white space. And so you'll see that kind of in the upper right portion is the only amount of white space that this resume has on the first page. And as somebody who visually just can't take in all this information, just be really cognizant that your resume needs white space. And I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to give you an example of my resume, and then also Melanie's going to show you hers. I think the easy to understand part is critical as well. If you say something that the average human, and I always think of it this way, like if my mom or my dad couldn't understand what a sentence meant because I'm using so many industry buzzwords, then it's not that great of a statement. And so really try to make everything that you say relatable to any audience. All right, Mel. So in the past year, I've done a whole lot of learning about, sorry guys, I can hear my voice coming back to me. So let me try to fix that really quickly. Okay, we'll try again. So I want you to consider removing any opportunities for potential bias in your resume. Again, these are personal choices. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm not telling you not to. I'm just saying that these are places where people could find potential bias. So if you list your physical address, people could make an assumption about, oh, well, she doesn't want to drive that far to come to work here. Or, man, do they really know what it's like to serve Denver's kids if they don't live in Denver? And so physical address is a place where bias can come in. Year of graduation could open the door for ageism. So say that someone was really looking for someone youthful, real young, and you had your year of graduation in there, inferences could be made about how old you are. So removing year of graduation is an option. A professional headshot. Again, this is a place where people could make decisions about you based upon your gender, based upon your race, based upon just how you look. And so including a picture opens up that opportunity for bias. College is an interesting one. I always tell this story that the former superintendent of Denver Public Schools, Tom Boasberg, went to Yale. And whenever he met someone from Yale, it was like immediate kinship, and like that person was his favorite person in life. And so college can be a way of like bringing people together because that is a kinship. I will say that I went to TCU, which is Texas Christian University. And I will tell you that in some interviews that people have made a lot of assumptions about me from going to TCU, which is a private school and is also a Christian school. And so it opens up an opportunity for people to make assumptions based upon where you went to school. Melanie, I'm going to toss it to you real quick.
Yeah, so Heather and I just had a lot of discussions about kind of this slide before we led this training, and it really doing this training really kickstarted my ability to sort of redo my resume and kind of update those sorts of things to get prepared. And I was really hesitant to take off my university. I went to University of Vermont, and there's a lot of people with New England pride. And so in the past, I have found it to be a point of connection between people who I'm interviewing or providing some like stories or interesting kind of anecdotes about that experience. And so you'll see when we review our resumes later that mine is listed on there. But again, as Heather said, just whatever you put in that resume, make sure that it's intentional. And so these are good things to consider. And also it really does come down to personal preference.
So guys, before we proceed, I was wondering if 3 people could just share something that maybe resonated with you or something that made you think a little bit.
I think something that's interesting is this, I would have never thought about how my college could have been taken like as a bias. Just, I just assume that's something that everybody always puts on their resume. So, and now I'm thinking like, oh no, is there something people are reading into mine? So that's a good point. It's interesting.
From the chat box, finding areas in my resume that might cause bias is a new thought. How about one more? Emily?
There we go. I'm sorry. I kind of ditto the college. I hadn't considered being a point of bias. And then same with physical address. I realized from being on the side of interviewing people and having been burned before by hiring somebody who lived far away and ultimately decided that the drive wasn't worth it, I hadn't thought about it from the other side of whether or not to have that on mine, and that someone could make a similar assumption about me. And just kind of like a reminder in 2 directions of don't judge someone based on their address and maybe take my address off.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, guys. I mean, I will tell you that as a hiring manager, if I see that someone is from out of state, that if it enters into my head immediately, well, then it would take them longer to get here, right? And so then I'm like less interested in them, which isn't fair. And so I think it's one of those things, like really think about the physical address one. I just include, and you'll see on my resume, I include how they can reach me. People can reach me through my email and through my phone number. All right, Mel.
So we also wanted to get into a little bit of kind of it's all in the details and some of those things that we may not always be thinking about that are important. And so I want to share a story. In about 6 years ago, I moved to Denver, and I didn't really know that many people. I didn't have any job connections, and I was really looking to get into the field of youth development. And so I was looking around for jobs, like posting up at the coffee shop and filling out all my applications. And I found a job that seemed really was a perfect fit for me. It was a assistant director of a summer camp during the summer, and then youth programs during the year. And it was kind of the perfect balance. I felt like I was really qualified for the job. And so I submitted my application, and on the job posting, it said the hiring manager was a person named Abby, A-B-B-E. And so I addressed, my letter of intent and my email that had the attachments to Abby, A-B-B-E, and sent it in, was feeling really good about it. And I got an automated email back that said, thanks so much for your application. We'll, reach out if we want to move forward on an interview. And it was signed Abby, A-B-B-Y. And I was horrified, because I know that for a lot of people, when they see their name misspelled, it's something that immediately, that's the immediate red flag, right? You just notice it. Maybe it's not a bad thing necessarily, but you just immediately, you can't unsee it. And so I sent an email back, and I said, Dear Abby, spelled A-B-B-Y, I just want to let you know that I saw that, in your email back, that you spelled your name with a Y instead of an E, and I just want to apologize. And, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. I'm really excited about this job. And she sent an email back, and I ended up getting an interview. And later on, I ended up getting the job. And one of the things that we talked about 6 months into my position was that one of the reasons why she decided to hire me was she knew that I was really detail oriented, and not only took the time to recognize, right, that her name was misspelled, and I saw that, but also to send an email and acknowledge it and have that interaction. And so it has always stuck with me that, you have so few touch points with the people who are interviewing for these jobs. And so every opportunity that you're interacting with them, whether that's the email with your attachments, you need to be so thoughtful about how you're spelling names, whether your attachments are right and what they're labeled as. If you attach the wrong job letter of intent to the wrong job, that's immediately going to be a challenge for that hiring manager to move forward with interviewing you. And so this is just an opportunity to remind you that kind of as you move through this process, to really check your work, and that every touch point with that person matters. Anything you want to add, Heather?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Mel said. I think one of my pet peeves is when someone just attaches something that says resume. I'm like, man, please put your name on it. Because if I'm looking for you later and I can't find you, because I can't find your resume is labeled with your name, it's a pet peeve of mine. And so I guys, just always put your name. Heather, interest, resume, 2020. Heather, interest, letter of intent, 2020. Just put your name on it. If you don't put your name on it, you're doing a disservice to those hiring managers who are probably looking at hundreds of pieces of paper. One thing that Mel and I were joking about this is in this presentation, the word resume is in here probably 17 times. And I will tell you, it was such a pain to have to go in and put the accent on the E, right? I didn't want to do that. I had to go find the accent and put it in there and copy and paste and make sure it was right every time. But that accent on that E, it matters, even if it's a pain. And so I think it's one of those things that your resume is a representation of you. So take the time to do it 100% correctly. So right now we're going to walk into mine and Mel's resumes, and we'll just go over the highlights with you, just tell you why we made certain decisions. And again, this is a judgment-free zone. So if you hate my resume, that is okay. If you don't like Mel's resume, it's okay, but don't hurt her feelings. And we're just going to give you like why we made the decisions that we made. So you'll notice that I did include a little bit of color. I thought that it was important. And I made a title for mine, you know, what really matters to me in my career, not just in my job. And the thing that most matters to me is developing leaders. So I put that right at the top. I think the statement that I did here would be what you used to see on resumes labeled as the objective. The objective row and column in resumes is a little bit outdated. And so a lot of people just lead with a statement of intent. You'll see kind of in my statement of intent that I included quotes from what my colleagues would tell you. Because again, people are looking for fact. They don't just want to know that you think you're awesome. They want to know that other people think you're awesome. And so that's why I included that information right at the beginning. Then you'll see kind of as you scroll down that I have with my most recent job, the most detail. And that's what you would expect. For your most recent or your current job, that's where you have the most bullets or the most information. As you go down in your resume, the information should shrink the further away it gets from today. So you'll notice that I have a lot of white space on the left. Now my resume could be far shorter if I had aligned this to the left, but I wanted to leave white space so that people could like let their eyes rest. You will see a lot of numbers. You'll see 32,500 plus, 150,000, like number, because eyes are drawn to that. So then as you continue to scroll down, go ahead to the second page, Mel. You'll see how much shorter my experience gets. And I've only included experience which I feel is relevant to my next job. If I have experience working in pediatric physical therapy, I have a lot of performing arts experience. I didn't go into that because it's not relative or important to whatever job I would be applying for next. So go ahead and continue to scroll. So then really briefly, you'll see how I listed my education. I just said I have a BS in biomechanics. Since a lot of people don't know what biomechanics is, I listed out what it is. And then DPS accomplishments, again, short, not like here's my 40 billion accomplishments. Unless you are the CEO of Google, just pick your 5 favorites. And then at the end, this is something that is, I would say, a little bit trendy, but like I love it. If somebody does this for me, I think it's amazing. So I not only list, I hate it when people say references upon request. Like if you're serious about wanting this job, give them your references. If you can't give them your current job, your current employer, that's okay. Just provide the people from your past. And the part that I was saying was a little bit trendy is just talking about who can speak to what. So you'll see at the top, Mary's my current supervisor, and I said she can speak to my work ethic, my areas for growth, and how my team is currently performing. And so I would say that this is something that I've seen a lot more in the industry lately. And I will say that as a hiring manager, I love it. I think that it's great for you to tell me like what I can talk to each of your references about, because I hate asking the same questions of all of the references. And I'll toss it over to Mel.
Great. I will open mine up. So you'll see in mine, you know, a lot of similar kind of things to Heather spoke about, kind of that white space, just kind of giving some opportunity for people to sort of, I've been on the other side of reading resumes, and I know that sometimes when I see like too much text, it's like you totally zone out. And so just trying to keep that in mind, and that's something that I'm still working on with mine. But you'll see here, similar to Heather, kind of longest at the top. And then going down, something that I would flag that's important is that depending on the job, people always ask like, should I have just one resume that I use? And that's just what I use to apply to all jobs. And I would say, depending on the job that you're applying for, you may want to tweak, not necessarily what you put on. I've had fewer years in the workforce, and so I don't have the luxury of just like picking and choosing certain things that I want to highlight. But what I will do is provide different the bullet points within that job of what I did. So for example, I worked at a summer camp called Hidden Valley in Maine, and I had a lot of different responsibilities at that camp. When I moved to Denver and I was applying for different jobs, what I put as kind of my responsibilities for that job, for the job that I have now that I applied for, I would put something more about like organizing and logistics and coordinating and things like that. However, I also oversaw the outdoor education program at this summer camp. So if I were applying for a different job that had a focus on that, I might include some bullet points about how I oversaw that program and did the hiring and some risk management pieces and things like that. And so just what the bullets that you put in can be specific to the job that you're applying for to highlight your different skills. Other things that I thought to include that I think that are important is that if you've grown in your position, you've grown positions within an organization, I think that that's a great thing to highlight. And so you might think like, oh, you know, I just worked at this organization and I did a couple of different things. I wouldn't combine those because it really shows that you were kind of promoted to a different position. And so when I worked in DC, I started as a staff assistant and then I moved up to the hearing clerk. In the job that I'm in now, I moved from program coordinator to program manager. And I think that that's something that hiring managers really like to see if you can show that trajectory, because it shows that you were, you know, competent in your job and did good work and were able to kind of move up. And so I would keep those as separate if you're able to. And then, you know, just some of the little things, you know, I talked about the all in the detail slide. So something that I want to fix on my resume is you'll see I have one more bullet that's on this second page. I would move that to the first one because some people just read them on the computer, but some people print them out. And so if you print it out, that's just personal preference, is just kind of annoying. Like it should all be on one page and that way it's kind of cohesive. And so you really want to be thoughtful about kind of those little things as well. You'll see I put my education and some of my like other schooling and study abroad experiences. That can also be a good conversation topic, and some certifications and then some resumes. And I'm also going to kind of do what Heather had suggested about kind of who can speak to what. That's what I have so far. So I will get out of this, move back.
So Mel, could you go back one slide? Maybe another one. Maybe another one. One more.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're going forward. Maybe go backwards.
I'm going the wrong way. Here we go.
Perfect. Okay, so before we jump into talking about letters of intent, could I hear from 3 people about something that made you think a little bit about your own resume? And either in the chat box or speaking out loud would be appreciated.
I like the idea of like if you've grown within an organization to split that up. I have all of mine like under one heading, and I've never thought to put it under like separate headings and have that stick out more. So I like that idea and we'll change that in my resume.
Thanks, Britta. And then in the chat box that it's too long, I just need to get to the point. Thank you, Sky. And then Lauren, including references in the resume. Great, thank you, everybody. Again, Mel and I are sharing ours, and that's part of the vulnerable part of resumes, right? And if you are not willing to share your resume with a trusted friend, colleague, partner, parent, then it's not ready to go. And I think that's one of the things is that your resume needs to have seen at least 3 sets of eyes before it goes up for a job. Robin said, including that what your references can speak to. Yeah, thank you, Robin. Okay, so to cover letter or not to cover letter, I will tell you that personally, I put more stock in a cover letter than I do in a resume. And I will tell you that my boss never reads cover letters, not once. And so cover letters are something that people feel strongly about. But here's the thing, you never know the hiring manager on the other end. And so I would always recommend providing one because you might have a me on the other end who loves them. So if you're thinking about doing a cover letter or if one is required, something that's super important is it's not the place to repeat what's on your resume. Don't tell me what's on your resume. The resume is the current and the past. The cover letter is the future. So what you want to do when you're writing a cover letter is make the person who's reading it think about what you would bring to that job. Here's why I'm perfect for this job. If you just reiterate what you say on your resume, I couldn't be more bored with that cover letter. So a cover letter should not be a repeat. It should be the future. Resume is past and present. Cover letter is future. Your cover letter is also the place to demonstrate your writing skills. If part of the job for which you're applying, if being a good writer or being a thorough communicator in writing matters, your cover letter is your place to show off your skills. And so please, again, that's where you want to make sure that you absolutely don't have any grammar or spelling or formatting errors. One thing that you really want to think about is if you don't personalize the letter to the job for which you are applying, don't bother. If I receive a cover letter that is to whom it may concern and it has nothing to do with the job for which they're applying, I can't tell you how fast I just push that one aside, because it shows a lack of interest in the company, it shows a lack of forethought, it shows a lack of research, and it shows a lack of attention to detail. And so if you don't, you could have a stock cover letter that's pretty ready to go, and then you can just personalize it a little bit to the jobs. But if you're not going to bother to personalize it, I wouldn't go for it. Another way to think about it is that cover letter is a little bit of an older term. These days, even though employers still call it please provide a cover letter, what most people are titling it is their letter of intent. This is what I intend to do for you as an employee. And so that's something you also want to think about when you're saving a file. So it would be Heather Interest Letter of Intent 2020. You'll notice that I always include the year because you want people to think and to know that you just updated it. It's very important to look like it's recent, even if maybe you haven't updated it since last year. And so I want to tell you a little story. When I moved from Denver, or when I moved to Denver about 10 years ago, I applied for a lot of jobs. And I ultimately ended up getting a job at the Children's Museum of Denver on their education team. It was amazing. But before that, I interviewed at a school, and I wanted to be their dean of culture. And this principal told me I was crazy, that I in no way was suited to be the dean of culture. And so I did a lot of research about being a non-traditional candidate. And I think that most of us in OST know that sometimes when we're going for jobs, we may not be the traditional candidate that's applying. And so as I was researching how to be the non-traditional candidate, I came across this video that's called Peacock in a Land of Penguins. And I will say that in my cover letter, my letter of intent to this principal, I said, I am your peacock in a land of penguins. And he later told me that that's what got me an interview, that I was saying, don't hire another penguin, don't hire the same, you need to hire something different. And so since I think that this is something that is super applicable to all of us in OST, this video is super short, but since we're often non-traditional candidates, I wanted us to go ahead and watch it together.
Many organizations hire people for their unique talents. Yet once employees join the ranks, they're expected to blend in. Perry the Peacock found himself in this predicament when he was hired by Penguins Incorporated.
The Penguins were confident in their penguin ways. Their world was orderly, predictable, and safe.
But there came a time when things began to change in the land of penguins as new birds began to join their ranks.
Among the arrivals was Perry the Peacock.
Hi, everybody. How'd you do?
He was creative and imaginative, and at the same time, practical and sensible. The penguins were fascinated with the possibilities that he represented. They thought he had real penguin potential. Perry, in turn, looked forward to the promise of status, wealth, and a sense of belonging to a great and powerful enterprise. He felt certain that his future would be bright in this new land.
But as time went on, a couple of the penguins took Perry aside.
Look, Perry, we like your work, but some of the penguins are uncomfortable with you. Why don't you put on a penguin suit so you look more like us?
What's wrong with the way I am? Aren't my accomplishments more important than my feathers and my voice? Why do I have to change? The penguins had a dilemma. How much diversity could they tolerate in their land without destroying their proud culture? Why change the style that had made them great?
Perry and his friends had a dilemma too. How much should they try to change to fit in? What price were they willing to pay for success?
But sometimes our differences allow us to contribute what others can't.
Wolves!
Those penguins will be such an easy takeover.
Yeah, they're slow and bureaucratic, set in their ways.
Perry rushed to alert the penguins.
Hey everybody, the land of penguins is in danger. I saw wolves in the distance and they're headed our way.
Oh, really? You must be mistaken. There have never been wolves in our territory before.
Here, see for yourself.
He's right. And they are awfully close.
We've got to figure something out.
The birds put their heads together, came up with a plan to trap the wolves, and sprang into action.
With this best-selling video, viewers will see the advantages of diversity and learn to appreciate each other's skills and contributions.
Nice tie.
So that video can be applicable for a lot of things. It can apply to a non-traditional candidate based on race, based on gender, based on ethnicity, or just based on different experience. And so it's one of those things that I want you to consider is if you are applying for a job where you are not the traditional candidate, or maybe you don't meet every single qualification, it's okay to say that. And it's okay to like wear that I am non-traditional and here's why that benefits your company. Don't keep hiring the same folks with the same credentials and the same experience. Hire me because I'm different. And so it is a different strategy to look at if you're applying for a job that is slightly outside of your field. So now I want to just take you into a mock-up of a cover letter and call out just why I made the decisions that I made. So you'll notice that I use the same color as I did in my resume. Since letters of intent and resumes are often looked at together, they need to match. Formatting, font, color. So don't make your cover letter all crazy colors that doesn't match your resume. They should look like documents that belong together. You'll notice that I've got my phone number and my email like right there. Immediately. There's my phone number, there's my email. You don't have to look for it. It's even called out in a different color. Then I think it's really important to have the hiring manager's name, title, address, or their email address. The to whom it may concern is very outdated. Do your homework. Even if you have to call the company and say, could you tell me the hiring manager for this position? It shows that you did your research. Mel, let's see. Could you stop sharing for just a second? Let me give you access so that you can show the comments. And everybody, I apologize for the technical challenges I am having this morning. Okay, Mel, I think if you refresh, you will probably be able to see the comments that I made and share them with everybody.
Yep, I can see them. I'll share now.
Great. I called out a couple of things just to watch for. You'll notice again that I have a ton of white space and it mirrors my resume. So again, the formatting of my resume and my letter of intent look the same. And I have a ton of white space. I want you to imagine that I didn't kind of move this whole column over to the right, how short my actual cover letter would be. It'd be pretty short. And again, a cover letter is not the place to just say what your resume says. Make sure that the date on the cover letter is super recent. Calling out something like longevity, like I started like as a loyal employee of DPS for 7 years. I started out by saying I am loyal. Call it out. That's a trait that all employers really look for, is longevity. Another thing is that if you can use a word that provokes a visualization, like I did here with the word compass, that is a visual that's positive. It's seen as steady. If you can provoke a visual with your words, it's something that people can access, and that is a recommendation for letters of intent. I think it is very important to be bold in your letter of intent, to say what you would do. If you hired me for this position, here's what I would do. If you select me for this role, you would never have to worry or second guess my intent or my ability to do what I say I'm going to do. I think another thing at the very end, like how you always close letters of intent or cover letters, can be a little clunky. At least it has been for me in the past. So if you're excited, say that here. I think it's important to say, I'm excited about this opportunity. Or if you would be grateful for this opportunity, say that. Because expressing emotion in your letter of intent is the place to do it. You always think of your resume as fact and data. You always think of your letter of intent as something that expresses what you want and expresses emotion. But you'll see, like, it is short and it is to the point.
Yeah, one thing I would add, Heather, too, is that a lot of times on these letters of intent, you see at the end, like, I look forward to scheduling an interview with you at your earliest convenience. And I think that the idea is that people will reach out to you if they want to schedule the interview. I think people put that because they don't know what else to say. So I think Heather's input about the gratitude and excitement, that's your place to really end with a bang of like why you're excited about this and grateful to connect with that, you know, whatever it is, but trying to avoid sort of like the very like business clunkiness of like scheduling an interview with you. I don't think is necessary.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is break up into some small groups, and Mel's going to facilitate that. And in your small groups, what we'd like for you to discuss are the following things, like how up to date is your resume feeling currently? 2 things that resonated with you about how to go about updating your resume or your letter of intent. And then one thing that made you think, that's not for me. And so Mel's going to put those instructions in the chat box so that you'll always be able to see it. And guys, please know that like you will not offend one of us if you're like, well, that's not for me. Again, this is all about something that's personal. So if you're like, that's not for me, I'm not going to do that. That's fine. And like, we will not be offended in the slightest. So we're going to be breaking up into these rooms. And then Melanie, I think we'll be there for about how long?
Yeah, I would say probably about 4 minutes or so. So kind of make sure, we'll give you a warning too when, just to make sure that everyone's had a chance to share. Great.
So likely on your screen, you'll get a pop-up that invites you to join a breakout room. And so accept that and it will take you right into that room, and then we'll bring you all back together.
So I'm going to send out the invitation now. Just make sure that you accept to join that room. They'll have about 4 minutes or so, and then we'll bring you back.
Okay, so Mel, if you want to jump back into the slides. Okay, so I have done a lot of research about interviewing, not only like being an interviewer, but being an interviewee. And what I found is that you're never going to not be nervous. And if you find yourself completely confident and not nervous, then either you really don't want the job or you're not prepared fully. And so you always want to be in this little place of discomfort, but preparedness. And so that's what we're going to focus on, is how are you so prepared that you are less nervous, but still in a position of wanting the job. So what we're going to do is break down different types of interview questions. There are, of course, 6 billion interview questions out there, but they all fall into about 5 categories. And so if you are prepared for those 5 types of questions, then you're going to be much better suited to not just get caught off guard and not have something ready. So the first type of question is the tell me a story question. And it usually sounds something like, this role requires decision making. Tell me about a time that you demonstrated decision making. And so usually it is one of these four types of questions. This role requires leadership. This role requires tell me about a time that you failed. That is one of the favorite questions these days. Tell me about a time where you were not successful. And we're actually going to work through that one here in a second. But the accomplishments one can really be framed with how you think about what are you most proud of in your career. And so I think it would be incredibly valuable. Mel and I have worked to create a worksheet for you guys. Mel, would you mind popping over to that worksheet? And while you do that, I'm going to answer a question in the chat thread. Let's see here. I have my references in a separate file from my resume. Is it all the same format? It is all the same formatting. Should I put these together? Does it really matter? If you think about it from a hiring manager's perspective, the more times they have to click a button to open things, it's kind of like annoying, right? So if all they have to do is click twice, open your resume, open your cover letter, that would be my recommendation. If you then have your references third, I mean, it would take 2 seconds. It's not that big of a deal, but my recommendation would be to put it in either like as a second page on your letter of intent or at the bottom of your resume. So we created this resource for you guys and we're going to share it with you, but this is going to give you the opportunity to work through these types of questions. And the best way to think about it is what is in my current role, how would I answer this question? And then in a past role, how would I answer this question? Because I can't tell you how many interviews I find myself in where the applicant can only give examples from one job. Now, if you've only ever had one job, that's fine, use that. But it is also a place for you to use real life examples. I had an interviewer one time, I asked them about a time they demonstrated leadership. And this person used a totally personal example about the time they led a group of people hiking and the group was unprepared and what they did to get that group through. That wasn't a work example, but to me, it demonstrated a ton of leadership because they took a group of people who weren't prepared to do what they needed to do and they got them through to the end. And so you don't just think about, I always have to give work examples. It is also an opportunity for you to give like real life examples. So when you're in an interview, just remember, if you have experience in more than one job, the more you can give examples from more than one job, the better. So like Emily, don't just give examples at Colorado Ballet, like give examples from the past too, right? Because that shows a breadth and depth of experience. Okay, so going back over to...
One thing I would add to that too is that if you are not willing to talk about it in an interview, don't put it on your resume. So if there are the hiring managers who will look at your resume and say, that's interesting that you did X, Y, and Z, tell me about that. If you're not willing to kind of have that conversation, then you'll just want to make sure that that's either not on there or not highlighted in the same way.
I could not agree more. I've absolutely had folks, put something on their resume and then they didn't really want to talk about that. I'm like, well, that was the thing I found most interesting. So put things on your resume you want to talk about because you'll be asked about them. So then the second type of question is, the strengths and weaknesses question, which I hate. I hate that question. And I've rephrased that question 400 times in my own interviews. But I want the group to right now just think about if you've ever been asked that question, or if you were asked that question, what would be a real weakness or area for growth that you would say in an interview. So for example, if someone asked me, what is your area for growth, Heather, I would say 100% it is that I need to have better patience. Sometimes I want to get a project or a decision made more quickly than it needs to be. And I need to slow down. And I've tried to surround myself with people who help slow me down. But it is absolutely an area for growth. I am impatient. Now, lots of times that leads to great results and fast results, but sometimes it can lead to people feeling like they weren't heard. So I know it's something that I want to work on, and I know it's something that I think about a great deal. So can a few other folks weigh in with, if someone asks you, what's your area for growth? Don't say, well, I don't delegate enough, or sometimes I work too many hours. Here's my favorite. I don't know when to ask for help. Guys, those aren't real. It has to be real. Like those absolutely might be true for you, but those aren't helpful to a hiring manager, and those often don't demonstrate self-awareness. So like, give me something that's self-aware. Emily, raising your hand, you go.
I know that I need to be more decisive, and I'm often pursuing jobs that are leadership and management positions, and I rely on a team that is more decisive than me, so I could be like, look at all these great options, what do you all want? But sometimes I need to just make a decision and decide.
Yeah, that's great, because that would tell me, if I was interviewing you, that you know how to help to manage a team. You know, you told me a little bit about yourself, but it also told me that you're reflective and you're like, I'm working on it. So somebody else, who else could tell me a weakness or an area for growth?
I would say my weakness is I get stressed away. So any kind of question they ask me, I know I didn't do good because I stumble. And I think that's my weakness.
Yeah, Myrna, how would you say that you've been working on that?
The way I've been working on it, it hasn't worked completely, but try to be confident. So I go to an interview being confident. I think I'm doing a little better, but I'm still kind of weak.
Yeah, I get it. And thank you for being like so vulnerable with that. I think that when you are talking about a weakness or an area for growth, it's incredibly important to say, here it is, name it, and then here's what I'm doing to work on it, right? Because that's what an employer wants to hear. An employer doesn't want to think that you're looking for them to solve the problem, that you know that this is an area for growth and here's what I'm doing about it. And so it's actually an opportunity to say, like, I'm proactive, I'm self-aware, all the things. All right, one more person with an area for growth.
While we're waiting, I'll also add that while you want to be fully authentic with your weaknesses, you do also want to be strategic, right? We all have probably a few weaknesses that we could choose from in our responses. If you were applying to a role as a chef, you wouldn't want your weakness to be like, sometimes I don't make great food, right? And so like thinking about sort of what are those main qualities that the job is looking for, I think it also is wise to be really thoughtful about which one you're going to pick out of, right? We all have a few different weaknesses. You don't want to choose the one that's like the direct main skill that is required in the job that you're applying for. So I think finding that balance between authenticity and also strategic is important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Mel. You know, if you're applying for a job in an after-school program and you lead with, I'm not really good with kids, probably not the best place to start. So yes, being strategic about what weakness you talk about, but here's the thing, be prepared. Like if you know what it is, then you will be confident with it. And so it's one of those preparation pieces that is so vital. Okay, everybody's thinking hard about this one, which is great. And no one likes this question, but the more prepared you are for it, the better off you'll be. I think that the strengths one is something that you just really want to be specific and really try to avoid buzzwords. Like if you're saying, I'm detail oriented, like, you know what? Every candidate says that. What makes you unique, right? I'm detail oriented and yet I can move at the speed of light. That's my strength, right? And so it's the what makes your strength uniquely yours. Because if you just say, you know, I'm a team player, well, so's everybody. Everybody's going to say that. I'm a team player who also has the unique skill set to do X, Y, and Z, right? And so I think it's the finding your strength and then saying why it's uniquely you. Okay, Mel, I'm ready for the next one. So one thing that I think is just critical is that when I'm interviewing somebody, I want to know, do you want this job or do you want a job, right? And the way to show that is to do your research. Because if in an interview, you can speak to what you know about the company. So question type 3 usually sounds like this. With what you know about this job or this company, why do you think you're the perfect candidate for it? In thinking about preparing for this question, a long time ago, my dream job would have been to work for a company called ABT. And it would have been, you know, around making their programs more inclusive. And so I did a ton of research. I went to their website. I found, you know, that they are actually doing some amazing work these days around inclusivity. And so if I was going into an interview with this company, I would be able to speak to that. Well, with what I know about this company, and then I would say what I know about it, and then I would say why it matters to me. If you don't know the organization's mission, if you don't know their vision, if you don't know maybe some of the challenges they're encountering, then you are not fully prepared. You know, I've been in interviews sometimes where I'll say, like, did you look at our website? And people will say no. And I think that is such an easy, it's so easy. Before you interview, please look at somebody's website. Please know what their company is about and what matters to them. And so this is an easy one. Just do your research. Question type 4, and this is one that can be phrased a lot of different ways, but in essence, the interviewer is trying to find out if you're brave or if you're innovative, right? And this is a place where they might say, well, you know, how would you improve our program about mushrooms, right? And if you don't know about their program with mushrooms that already exist, then you don't know how you can improve it. So like, see the previous question, do your research. But then they want to be able to see, like, do you have any new ideas? And this is kind of the peacock theory, right? Are you going to come in and be a penguin? Or are you going to come in and have new ideas that can take us to this next place? The one thing you want to be careful of is don't be insulting or make assumptions. So even if you read on someone's website about their program about mushrooms, that doesn't mean you know everything about it. And you don't know if the person who's interviewing you created it. So don't insult what's already there. Be complimentary of what's already there. And then talk about, and here's what we could do in the future. So complimenting what is already there and then taking that next step is critical. I often will ask a question, and this is common in a lot of companies, everybody, that like they'll say, well, like, you know, our mission is creating opportunities for school communities to inspire and engage Denver's youth and families. How would you improve upon that? And they're seeing, can you think quickly in the moment? Can you think on your feet, right? Well, if you already looked at my website and you already know what my mission is, you're going to be far better prepared. So I think my biggest kind of suggestion to you for these types of questions is be prepared, pay compliments, and then like think big and into the future. So this is just something that I think is critical. Typically in an interview, except if you interview at DPS these days, your interview lasts about an hour. They want to know in 1 hour that you want this job. And I want to tell you a quick story. When I applied for the jobs in Denver when I moved here about 9 years ago, and I applied at the Children's Museum, I was so underqualified. I had never worked at a museum. I had never written curriculum aligned to Colorado academic standards. Obviously, I didn't live in Colorado. And I was definitely a peacock for that job too. And I just remember the last interview that I had with the hiring manager, I just said, I want this job and I would never disappoint you. And I got the job, and about 3 months in, the hiring manager told me, you were not qualified, you were not the best candidate, but I knew how much you wanted it and I knew you'd work hard. So if you want it, say that. Say, I want this job. I really want it. And I think don't ever leave that unsaid, because you might miss a humongous opportunity. Mm-hmm. So then the last kind of question type is, what questions do you have for us? I will tell you that this is the spot where most candidates who are probably like performing like pretty well for me, like drop off a cliff. If you don't have questions for me, you don't want this job. If your only questions for me are about pay rate, next steps, then you don't care about our company or our mission. And so you could have had a pretty good interview, but if you don't have questions for me, you are missing a huge opportunity. And so I think the other thing to consider is you only have 1 hour to decide, do you want to work for them? If you don't ask questions, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. So what I'd like now is for, let's have 4 people share just like what kind of question have you asked or been asked that you think would be good in an interview. If you are an interviewee and you're asking, you know, when you get to that point in the interview, it's almost over, and they say, well, what questions do you have for us? What would be a good question to ask?
I think you could ask a question about maybe like about the culture of the workplace. Do you think that that would be something?
Sure. How would you phrase it?
You know, you could maybe say like, you know, I learned so much about your company by reading about it online and the resources I have. But, you know, I couldn't really tell the culture of your company through just those words. Could you maybe talk about things that you do with your team to bring people together? Something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone in the chat box, Jessica, said, what do you think are the most important qualities for someone to excel in this role? Yeah, Jessica, I like that question. I think one way that I've heard that question asked that I think hiring managers really respond to is making that question a little time bound, which would be, what would success look like for someone in this role in the first 30 days? What would, what 3 qualities? Like basically it's like making it like time bound, because this question is kind of broad. You know, I could answer this question 100 different ways. But I think if you can be a little bit more specific, that hiring managers find it easier to answer questions and give you better responses if it's time bound or if it's real specific. So I'll give you a hint. People like to talk about themselves and their work, right? And so it's always appropriate to ask, you know, what do you see as the greatest challenge facing this organization in the next 6 months? What do you like most about working here? Oh my gosh, people love that question. If you ask me, what do you love most about working here? I would love to tell you that, and that will give you information you need about, do I want to work for this company? So letting people talk about themselves or their work is always a good strategy. Let's get one more. Let's see, Austin said, tying something back to a mission or value that is lived out on a day-to-day basis. Absolutely, yes. Yes, if you can tie your question back to something that matters to them, like their mission, their vision, their values, they will absolutely respond to that. Robin said, is it appropriate to ask the hiring manager their managerial style? Absolutely. I think I would think about how you phrase it. I think it would be, if I was to come onto your team, what are the 4 qualities that would make me successful? Or what do you need from the people on your team? And so, yeah, I think, because if you ask that, like, what's your managerial style, you're going to get kind of some buzzwords back, like, well, I lead by distributive leadership or consensus or whatever. But you really want to know, like, what do they need from you? And so I think I would just phrase the question a little bit differently. And then how many questions do you recommend having prepared for this portion? 5, because you want them to cut you off. There's nothing worse than an interviewer saying, well, do you have any questions for us? And then you're like, no, I'm good, because you've run out of questions. Like, I would always have 5 prepared, and you might get to 3 of them. So pick your 3 favorites to go first, but then have 2 like in your pocket, because the more interest you show in their job and in this job and in this company, the more likely they are to hire you. And if you run out of questions, that doesn't demonstrate curiosity. It doesn't demonstrate that you want this job. And so I would always have more prepared than you think you're going to have time for.
Yeah, I would also add just being really nimble during this process, because sometimes these come up during the interview. And then if you just like say like, okay, I know I'm going to ask these like 3 questions and one of them came up, then it's kind of like you weren't paying attention or you weren't listening during the interview if it was already stated. And then people feel like kind of annoyed that they might have to restate what their values are or what that looks like or whatever it is. And so just having more than you think. So that way, when it's like one has come up, you don't all of a sudden have like only two left.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So right now what I'd like is for you to think about an action plan. So whether you have a piece of paper or you want to pull up something on your computer, what I'd like you to do is just make a 3-step action plan. And I gave an example here that action 1 could be to update your resume and send it to 3 friends. Or, and I do want to make this offer sincerely, you can send it to Mel and I. We'd be happy to provide you feedback. Know that we give a lot of feedback. When folks send their resumes, it will be redlined. It will have a lot of suggestions. So if you're in the mood for a lot of feedback, send it to Mel and I. And we will give you unbiased. We don't, we have no stake in this game right now. So if you want to send your resumes to us, we'll put our email addresses in the chat box here in a second. So please feel free to use us to help you improve your resume. Same thing with the cover letter. But you need to ask people who are going to give you honest feedback. If somebody hands you back your resume or cover letter and tells you it looks great, they weren't the critical friend you needed. Okay? Like Melanie sent me her resume not too long ago. I did not hand it back to her and say it looks great. Even though it looked pretty good, I handed it back and I gave her a lot of feedback. And I handed my resume to a trusted friend of mine, and she was like, what are you doing in this section? And I was like, yeah, that's a lot. Then action 3 is the document that we created for you for interview preparation. I think it would be an exceptional idea to maybe even work through this with some of your colleagues. Like if you have a colleague who wasn't on the call today, to maybe, say, hey, I have this resource. Let's do this as a team, get on a Zoom call, do mock interviews. I will tell you that we have a part 2 of this training where we actually step into mock interviews using this information. So I think it's something that could be really useful to your organizations. But you're never going to feel good about interviews until you practice. Like practice is the only way to start feeling more comfortable and confident. I think we have a question here.
Yeah, while you're looking at that, Heather, one thing I'll add about interview prep is that it was one of the hardest things I've done, but it was really important, is that I will record myself using like my iPhone audio questions to answers to interviews, because there is nothing more painful than listening to yourself talk, but it really helped me hone in on like, ooh, this is like, I'm going off on a tangent here, or this isn't really responding to the question, or I could rephrase the sentence. Not all of us have people that we want to like call and do this with, but you're your own toughest critic, right? And so in many ways, if you kind of just test against yourself and listen to it, it's like, how would I hear this question or respond to this question if someone was saying it to me? That can be the most helpful thing in kind of improving your interview answers.
Yeah, and Lauren had asked, if a genuine question comes up during the interview, is it appropriate to ask it then or wait until the end? I think it's always fine in an interview. If a question comes up that feels like it's the right time to ask it, it's super related to their question, ask it. I'm never annoyed. Like if someone asks me a question, it doesn't interrupt my cadence. It doesn't like make me think, well, I'm asking questions right now. It shows curiosity. I want somebody to ask questions. And so I would say that if it feels right at the time, to go ahead.
Yeah, I would also say it makes it feel more conversational. If you're able to sort of have a back and forth, it makes the interviewer more comfortable, because being on the other side, it's like, okay, you ask a question and then they respond and then it's quiet and then I ask a new question and then you respond. So if you do ask a question, I think that can be beneficial and also making it feel more comfortable for everybody.
Yeah, okay, so we have another question. It says, I tend to find myself rushing when in interviews because I am thinking about not wanting to run out of time or want to feel like I'm taking too much time to answer a question. Do you have any tips for this? I think that if you work through that document with your examples, a typical interview question and answer is under 2 minutes, meaning I ask you a question and then you have about 2 minutes to respond. And so I think what Mel was saying is tape yourself, like responding to, tell us about your greatest career accomplishment and see how long that is. And I almost guarantee you that it's shorter than you think. That it feels like in an interview that you're talking for an eternity. But I have had very, very few interviews where the person talked so much that I was like, good night. Yeah, you need to and I would give that feedback. I would just say, we only have about, a minute left for this question. And so if somebody's giving you cues, like you need to make it more concise, definitely listen to those. But I think my best advice to you would be practice answering them, record yourself and see how long you're taking, because it probably isn't as long as you think.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to let's take about 4 minutes just to kind of work through. Like I said, even if you just have a little Post-it and you want to write down your action plan, the key to it is you need to put an end date on it by May 20th, by whatever. So let's take about 4 minutes to just really dig in and make an action plan with end dates. And I will ask for people to share. So, and I'm going to call. I see all your names. I'm going to call on you.
So I just put the link to the document in the chat box. So you can just go ahead and copy and paste that link into your browser and it'll ask for you to make a copy and you can click OK.
And as you're thinking about this, think about the who. So if you're going to share your resume with 3 people, who? If you're going to share your cover letter, who? If you're going to practice Zoom interviews, who? So write those down. Because if you just say 3 people, you won't do it. Write down the who. All right, I'm starting to see people looking up, which is the Zoom equivalent of the lull in conversation. So I'm going to use that as my cue to bring everybody back. So could I have 3 people just share their action plan, because it might help inform others who are working on theirs.
I'll share. I am going to work on updating my resume and cover letter throughout this week and next week, and I've put a date on it for May 15th, which is next Friday. Originally, I had put the Friday after that, and then I was thinking, like, what's the point of pushing it out so far? Like, I just need to get it taken care of. So that was just kind of one thing I thought about, so moved it to the 15th. I could probably even move it sooner than that. And then I'm going to share it. I've decided with Heather and Melanie, and then a friend who works outside of the organization who used to be a supervisor of mine, just because I think it would be good to get feedback from people within my organization, and then someone who works in a, she works for the city and has different views and ideas about resumes and hiring. So I would like to get her input as well. And then I thought that I could work on practicing, like filling out that form and practicing interviewing just with one of my coworkers, Becca, on like a Zoom call. Just because I struggle with my conversation in interviews, and so I also hate practicing for it, but forcing myself to do so I know will be very beneficial. So having someone that knows me to keep me accountable, that will help me do that, even though she knows that I don't like those things, I think will be helpful. So, and then she also knows me pretty well and knows like how I work because of we work so closely. So I think that she'll be able to be honest and transparent with me and in how I'm answering questions and stuff like that. So it's my plan, 2-week plan.
Great, thank you. And Britta brings up an important point of seeking, diverse points of view. Don't ask for feedback from everyone that lives and breathes and works in your organization. Ask for feedback outside of your organization, even if it's your dad. Like ask for feedback from someone who is not in it and breathing it every day. Because they won't catch all the places where you're using buzzwords, where you're using acronyms, where you're saying something that's not clear, because they speak the same language as you. All right, let's do one more share, please.
I'll share. I think that the biggest thing I really do want to focus on is being more available to share my resume because I've kind of just guessed my way through it, and I do need more eyes. So I made my goal to find 3 people to just take a look at my revised resume by my goal was May 10th. And I was gonna use my college roommates and family. But yeah, just being more open with that, because if I'm submitting these resumes to complete strangers and I'm not getting feedback from other people, I think that I could benefit from that a lot. Also, to working on updating that, because I feel like I have such a basic resume now after this training. Like literally don't have any I don't have a lot of the things that were pointed out, so I just know what to go in now and really work on. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. And everybody on the call, please know that Mel and I are happy to help you with whatever part of this journey you're needing help with. It's definitely something that all of us are still learning and growing in. And if you find a cool resource that would be great for the group, please send it to us because DQUAC would be happy to provide that to the people who participated today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo Heather's thoughts and also add that to be able to work on this before you need it desperately is a wonderful place to be in, because when you need a job desperately, or oh my goodness, the window to apply is tomorrow night, and you're scrambling to put this all together, it's a harder ask to send it to 3 people and be like, can you look at this in the next 24 hours and send it back to me, and it won't be your best work. And so it's just really thoughtful and smart to do this before you really need it. And of course, the letter of intent is specific to what you you want to do. But if you have your resume in place and you have, the examples of the different questions that we went through today, you're going to be in a much better place to be able to write that quickly in a effective way and be able to kind of get everything else you need together. So great. So we are going to move into our optimistic closure. So some of you may have seen this before, but there is a TED Talk on something called power poses. And in this session today, we talked a lot about the things that you say during an interview and the things that you write down in your letter of intent and your resume. And I think it's also important to step back and think about our kind of state of mind and our confidence. This can bring up a lot of feelings for people, and it's important to think, you want to do all the technical things well, but you also want to be in a place emotionally and psychologically to feel like you can put your best self forward as you enter into these experiences. And so Amy Cuddy did some research, and it shows that our body language actually governs how we think and feel about ourselves, and thus our bodies can have an impact on our minds. So how we hold our bodies and our posture and what we do can impact our level of confidence and how we think about ourselves. And so these are some of those power poses. And so what she recommends in this TED Talk, and I'm happy to share this resource when we send out a follow-up email, there's a great TED Talk about kind of these are some of the poses that you can put yourself in to increase your confidence and impact what your mind thinks about yourself. And so before going into those interviews and that sort of thing, doing some of these exercises can be really helpful. I did one before this training today, so it can just be a really good grounding exercise. So in a moment, we are going to get up and we are going to do a couple of these poses. And I know it might feel a little silly, but it's fun to just kind of practice and kind of experience what it feels like. I think it boosts my mood. So I'm gonna bring you all along with me here in this afternoon. I know we've been sitting for a long time too. So take a look at these poses. And what you're gonna do is pick two poses, have two poses in your mind that you're going to do. And so let's all stand up if we're able. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna expand my screen so I can see all of your beautiful faces while we do this together. Oh no. All right, so we're gonna pick a pose in 5 seconds, and we're gonna hold it for 5 to 10 seconds, depending on how long we'll do this for, and then we'll do another one, okay? Thumbs up if we're ready. Excellent, and I thank you all the people who have their video on who were brave to do this in front of each other. So here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pick pose. And just hold it. Take a breath, a nice deep breath. Really breathe into it, feel your feet on the ground. Okay, we're gonna pick another one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everyone looks so good. Hold it, breathe in and out. All right, now we can take a seat. Thank you all for indulging me in that. See, I feel a little better. How's everyone else feel? Feeling good? Excellent. Thank you. All right, so that is just about it. There's a lot of really interesting research too out there about listening to music before you go into situations where you need more confidence as well. So definitely encourage you to look into some of that stuff, and I can send those resources out after as well. Music and your body position can be really helpful before going into those somewhat stressful environments. So that is just about it for us. So this is a link to our survey. Heather and I are always looking to improve this training and think about what people need the most. So if there's something more that you need, I'm just gonna copy and paste this link into our chat box so that you can click it, and then I'll also pull it back up so you can use the QR code if you'd like. But we're always looking to improve this training or think more about what the out-of-school time community needs as far as training around this goes. So if you have any ideas, or you want a deeper dive, or you have other questions about how we can help or what this looks like, please don't hesitate to reach out and feel free to provide that feedback on the form. So you can open your phone camera and hold up your phone to get the QR code, or you can copy and paste that link into your browser. And if you are on the phone, I can send out a follow-up email to this to you after with this link to the survey as well.
And Jada, I'm responding to your question right now in the chat box.
Great, thank you.
And then, great, so into